Welcome to episode 356 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Tyler Taormina, who wrote and directed a cool coming-of-age film called Ham On Rye. He talks through the process of writing the script and how he was able to get it produced. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 356. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and career letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Tyler Taormina. Here is the interview. Welcome, Tyler, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I grew up in Long Island, New York, and I was always drawn to it. I definitely identify with the stealing the video camera from the family tradition, to the point where I would make little sketches and vignettes and edit them in what was it called? Movie Maker? Is it Windows Movie Maker? Yeah.
Windows Movie Maker, sure.
Right, and I made like half-hour episodes that actually we submitted to public access, and they would air at 5:30 in the morning when I was like 12 and 13.
Nice.
So it's just always been something that I've been very, very drawn towards. Though I did have a little foray in music for many years, which overtook my attention and passion, and then I segued back into film.
And do you have any insight? Why were you attracted to filmmaking? Have you thought about that? Do you have any insight as to why it attracted you? Why you were drawn to it?
I think film. Well, there's two ways to answer that: filmmaking as opposed to other mediums, right? And then just creativity in general, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So creativity in general, I think it's just displaced energy. I think it's got to go somewhere, and thank God it's something productive for me. Mm-hmm. It's a vice like any other. And filmmaking as opposed to other mediums, that's a good question. I think that it suits my temperament. I think film it really captivates your attention, whereas let's talk like poetry, right? Which film is obviously a very poetic medium by its potential, but poetry, you need to be so keyed into. It requires so much from the reader to really derive everything that a poem can contain. But I think film seizes you in a way. It seizes your attention. It arrests you in a way that I think has always spoken to me and my just a relationship with attention, things like this. That's why I appreciate slow cinema, because it forces you. It really forces this thing of you that is so hard to experience these days. Stillness.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you're growing up in Long Island. You're creating these little shorts, getting them on public access. What did you do after high school? Did you go to a film school? Did you move to Los Angeles? Maybe take us through those sort of years.
Right. Yeah, I studied at Emerson College. I studied screenwriting, and I had a big goal to write kids television. I wanted to make the next Pete and Pete. I wanted to make the next Hey Arnold. These shows I worshiped growing up, and I still think they're just so beautiful for a young person to leave an impression on their mind. And as I was doing that as sort of like that's my work for school, I was making albums and playing like 3 live shows a week in Boston, and really finding a lot of meaning and purpose in music. And then once I graduated from college, I pretty much fell in love with cinema and through making kids shows, actually.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. Did you work on some kids shows?
This will be probably good for this the world of your podcast and your work, because I made a realization quickly that, like, who's going to want to read my script? Like, no one knows who I am. Mm-hmm. Even though I would write the scripts, I'd be proud of them. For the kid shows, I wanted to pitch them. I heard about a story of someone delivering a pizza with a screenplay to a company, and I wasn't going to do anything like that. I'm not that kind of person. So I said, I'll just make it. I'll make what I'm writing about. It's a show I had called Suburban Legends. I'll just make it. By doing that, I became a filmmaker. I just fell in love with it. I started looking at all these interviews about directors, like, what do they do? What do I have to do this? And I just absolutely dove into the world of cinema, kind of unknowingly. That was
Okay, so let's talk about that process a little bit. So what stage of your life were you at? Had you moved to Los Angeles? Were you still in college? Did you get out of college? And then just take us through that process, because I'd just be curious. I know there's a lot of people listening to this that are in exactly that position. They've got an idea for a show or maybe a short or maybe even a feature. And what are those first steps for someone that doesn't have like a technical background in production? What were some of those first steps of actually getting this thing done?
Yeah. Well, I've witnessed two minds of people in the postgraduate life, and I started right after graduation. I didn't skip a beat. I was just like, I need to do something. I had a lot of nerves.
And did you come out to LA, or were you still in?
I was in LA. Okay. Emerson offers an LA program, so my last semester was in LA, and then subsequently I moved there. But I noticed these two minds of people. One, they're waiting for their big break. Two, they're doing things. Mm-hmm. You got to be the doing things. You can't wait. No one's going to give anything to you. No one knows who you are. No one cares. You need to do things. You absolutely. So I would say become a filmmaker, even if you're just a writer, if you have no other connections into the industry, because you need to show your works into fruition, right? And mm-hmm. this is really, I'll say it's the only way, even though I know people can get their screenplays made, but in how I felt and how I emotionally internalized that, I said, no, this is the only way. And I think it's something to live by. I really do think that.
Yeah, for sure. And so then let's talk just briefly about, okay, so take us through some of those steps. So you don't have any production background. What were some of those steps of getting this production off the ground? Did you know some people from college? You knew a camera guy? Did you just meet some people in LA? Take us through some of the sort of logistical steps.
Right. I think one of the biggest ingredients for someone trying to make it in their field in the film world is friends. That's what I had. That's all I had. I had friends, and they were not much more experienced than I, but I had them, and they knew a little bit. And we were so naive to the process. I had no idea what I was doing. My friend was a script supervisor. He confessed to me at the end of the shoot. I had to Google what it was the morning of the shoot. That's what we were working with. And when there's a will and you have somewhat of I guess we had a knack for it, really, in some capacity. You could look at the Suburban Legends episode 1 and 2 and 3 on Vimeo or YouTube. You could see what we were working with and the degree of competence that we were able to work with. But it didn't matter, because where there wasn't technical proficiency in high def, there was a lot of creativity and heart. And that's the strength of the show. That's mm-hmm. what the show is. So don't be afraid. Maybe you won't be able to articulate that with your technical shortcomings, but maybe you will. So,
mm-hmm. And what did you do with the show? So you got the show done. What did you do? You entered into some festivals. Did you submit it to some production companies?
I didn't submit it anywhere, but I did have this experience. Okay, so going back to the different types of people that you see in Hollywood, there's the ones who say, like, I love David Fincher, I love Quentin Tarantino, I'm going to do this. Great. Those are two great directors. Love it. But there are ones that maybe have a little bit off the beaten path interest in, like I was saying, I want to do kids TV. Like, that's like, what? Everyone I met, mm-hmm. what? And then they're like, but you should meet this person then, because they know someone who had that specific connection with. Okay, I'll meet that person. You say I want to be Quentin Tarantino. Okay, the conversation kind of ends there. Mm-hmm. But if you say, I want to do kids TV, I love 90s Nickelodeon, they're going to say, oh, you should meet this person. Then you meet that person. So I was meeting a lot of people through this sort of niche interest I had. And one of the people I met who became an early mentor of mine was Tom Lynch, who is TV producer, film producer, and he's been working with Nickelodeon for a number of years. He made a lot of shows I watched growing up, such as Secret World of Alex Mack, Journey of Alan Strange, 100 Days for Eddie McDowd. These shows I loved. I mean, I love. And Tommy, we clicked so quickly, and he guided me into the world of kids television. We ended up developing together for a few years, and then by that point, I had fallen in love with art house cinema, and I just kind of stepped away from TV.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig into your latest film, Ham on Rye. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick picture logline. What is this film all about?
Oh, God. I haven't been asked to give a logline in a long time, and I got to admit, this is like the question that makes me look like an idiot because I don't know. I mean, I'll give you basic objective facts about it. It's a bunch of teenagers growing up in a suburban environment that is depicted in a somewhat picturesque way, and they're dressed up in their grandparents' best. They look like a bunch of fools in a way because they're dressed up in such dated clothing that doesn't fit them, and they end up going to a delicatessen where they partake in this ritual that is a sort of a threshold to cross in terms of the real world, coming of age, and all these things.
Okay, very nice. And where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of this idea?
Right. The film was conceived in a hot tub of all places. A friend had made a joke. He was just like, "Oh yeah, a place where you go to hook up, like a sandwich shop." Don't know why. This is some weirdness of mine, but my eyes lit up, and I said, "I'm going to make a movie about that." I fell in love. Love at first sight. With the image I had in my head of these kids in the sandwich shop, biting the sandwiches, looking at each other, nervous for seeking validation in one another, Mm-hmm. And I just fell so in love with those images. They were with me all the time. I listened to, I actually haven't said this in an interview yet, but I listened to the song Tiny Dancer, I think it was.
Sure, by Elton John.
Yeah, I just listened to it and I pictured the kids and I was just like, this is heaven. I loved it. I fell so deeply for this idea. And when you love an idea that much, it tends to spread its tentacles, and that's what happened.
So at what point did you said you made this transition from wanting to get into kids' TV shows to art house cinema. When did you make this transition? And you're saying about this hot tub, was this fairly recently, like after the kids' TV, or all sort of intermixed?
There was a very specific pivot point, and that was when I was waiting for my first contract. It was something, I don't want to get into the details of it, but this was the first contract. This was the big, whoa, okay, I've been waiting for this for years. Here I am with a contract. And we passed that contract back and forth for months. And I felt like I couldn't make any more kids' TV because I was waiting for this. I didn't feel right. And as a result of all this waiting and bureaucracy, I had to get my energy out somehow. I had so much, I needed an outlet. And I made my first short film called Wildflies, which was such a radical departure from kids' television. It was so abstract and real cinema. And that's how I fell in love with that whole process. And maybe 2 years after that moment, where I literally remember saying to myself, like, I'm going to really dive into cinema because it's like, it's giving me this purpose that I'm always searching for. That's when the hot tub happened.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about your writing process a little bit. In this particular case, Eric Berger is a co-writer. Maybe you can talk about that collaboration a little bit. I have a lot of writers that collaborate. Just talk about your guys' collaboration process. Are you guys in the same room? Do you outline together? You do note cards together, then divide up scenes? Does he take up a pass at a scene, then you rewrite his scene? Maybe just talk about sort of that process of collaboration and how that worked with this particular script.
Absolutely. So this was our first script together. Now we have 2 more. And so Eric Berger is one of my oldest friends from middle school, 12 years old, something like that. And we were very close over the years. And then, college, we not drifted apart, but, other things, became prevalent in our lives.
Sure.
And then one fateful visit he came to Los Angeles, and I told him, I got to go see this movie. It's only playing this weekend. Sorry, but you have to come with me. I don't know if you're going to like it. And it was a movie called Cemetery of Splendor by this director who I worship called Apichatpong Weerasethakul. And I'm watching it, and I'm like loving it. And I'm like, oh, he's going to hate me for this. Oh, I hate doing this to people. And then when it ends, he stands up and he goes, oh my goodness, he loved it, right? And I said, there's a whole world of this art cinema thing. You should watch some movies with me. And then I started sharing him my ideas for Ham On Rye, and his background is in philosophy and literature, and it was just such a marriage. And for this specific project, I had an outline and a short, and he was really it was very conversational. He would really help me find the foundations and the support and the details and the restraint. He was very big on restraint, and we didn't want to be too explicit because the film is somewhat of a high concept if you really think about it, and I didn't want that to be known. We wanted to really bury that. And now with this other film we're working on called Christmas Eve in Miller's Point, we just did ground up together, and we divided all the scenes, all the index cards, and we have such a similar brain that it just works out.
Gotcha. And so what does your process look like in terms of your own writing? Do you write in the morning? Do you write in the middle of the night? Do you go to Starbucks? Do you have a home office? How does just your actual writing process go typically?
Definitely a binge writer, a lot of preparation, outline. I love outlining. I love filling index cards or Post-it notes on my wall. I love looking at them every day when I wake up. Going to sleep, I see the scenes. I think I love that. And then when it's time, when the index cards on the wall, the postcards feel right, then it's my favorite is writers' retreats. You take an Airbnb, you just write for 72 hours straight or something like that. I love it. Really beautiful.
Yeah. And how much time would you say you spend in the outlining stage versus actually in final draft cranking out dialogue and character descriptions and scene descriptions?
Yeah, I would say a long time in outlining. I really like to bring it to the point where we know it. It's already. You know what the difference between outlining and the script for me is? So outlining, all the mechanics are all there, all the framework is there, all the little, the gags and the this and that. But then when you're in the script phase, the aura becomes apparent to you, and the really fine tuning of the timing and the rhythms, and just like it forces you to be in the room where you might find things you didn't see, but it's pretty much just like a glazing over the cake you've already made.
Yeah. So the way you're describing it is you spend a lot of time outlining, then you might do one of these writer retreats and bash out a first draft in 72 hours and then start to rewrite from there.
Yeah, and there will be a bunch of rewriting. Probably, actually, for this case of Christmas Eve in Miller's Point, there's 3 or 4 writing retreats to really hammer away at all the notes that we were seeing and whatnot.
Perfect. And so speaking of notes, what does your development process look like? For an example, using this script, Ham On Rye, you guys got a draft done. It sounds like that's when Eric came in and you started working with him. But who else did you show the script to? And how do you take those notes? If you get notes from someone that maybe you respect, but you don't feel like the note is quite understanding what you're trying to do, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What does your development process look like? And then how do you take notes that you don't always necessarily agree with?
Yeah. Okay. So kind of going back to what I was saying before about friends, I think it's the biggest friendship and, collaboration. Friendship is a sort of collaboration, isn't it? Finding the friends that I really vibe with, that we really respect one another, and we really have a similar and very specific set of values and things that we look for in art and in life and think are funny and whatnot. I have that. I have a group of like 6 or 7 people, and we all produce each other's films. We've done 2 features now, one of mine, one of my friend John Davies, and more to come. We are very excited about the same thing. So I have a great deal of trust when I take a draft to them. They get it. Mm-hmm. But I have experience, maybe not sometimes in the innermost circles, but just in general, because I'm a very social person. I really love to show all my friends my work, and it's vice versa, obviously. And when I get those notes, you learn. You can kind of tell like that person has this kind of mind to them, and they probably will give a note like that. But that's because that's their strength, and that's how they view the craft, and then I have this person who views it totally differently, and I kind of know. You know what you're going to get yourself into when you send a draft. Granted, you understand that draft yourself. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Sometimes it could be discouraging to be misunderstood, But if you have enough friends, you can really set up a wide net to really kind of gauge that externally through others as to what something is, right?
Yeah. I'm curious too about what were some of your influences with this movie? I mean, there's obviously a long history of John Hughes teen movies and just art house sort of teen movies. What were some of your influences and what were some of the tropes? I always just like you're looking at some of these movies, you have something in mind. What are some of the tropes that you kind of wanted to subvert? And maybe what are some of the tropes that maybe you wanted to lean into?
That's a good question. You know, it is a sort of John Hughes Dazed and Confused subversion movie, but I don't know if it's a subversion of tropes as much as it's a subversion of like a naivety or something like that, or just like so in the case of Dazed and Confused, like that's such a glory movie, right? That's like they're cool, like I'm never that cool, I don't know anyone that cool, and that was sort of the idea. That's one of my favorite movies. I think that movie is such a beautiful piece of art. But I was thinking, like, no, this is a fantasy. Like, no one lives like this. Maybe they do, and I'm just not me.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
yeah, no, this is. Let's see what the actualization of like being. You know, a lot of it's being like sort of medicated in a way, or like drugged by these John Hughes and Dazed and Confused movies. You see them, and you even like how John Hughes can get pretty, grim and real with his films. There's still like a sheen of romance, and like it kind of is a little bit sedating to watch his movies. Like I kind of just feel like everything's good, which is kind of like there's a riff in the movie that speaks to the subversion that they read a postcard. One of the characters, their older sister is grown up now. She's in the real world, and she sends him a postcard that says, "Gwen, I'm so good. Life is so good. Honestly, everything's so good. Love, your sister Amy." That's this is the trope I guess I'm subverting, is that's sedating quality of this history of teen cinema that we've had, and how it's wonderful. We love it. I love it, but it also I think really it causes a pretty rude awakening when the real world hits. I think.
Yeah. So let's talk about the next step. So once you had a draft that you were happy with, what were those next steps to actually getting it into production? Was it just a function of just leaning on your friends that you had made, sort of this group of filmmaker friends, and getting it into production? Did you have to raise some money? Did you submit it to production companies? Did you have some investors? Maybe just talk about that process, basically taking it from screenplay to produced film.
Yeah, absolutely. First step, hardest step, I would say. And that is the sheer declaration, I'm going to make this movie. That is the hardest part. It really is. You could say, I'm going to make it someday. No, we're going to make it. And actually, we're going to make it in summer of next year. And then you tell enough people that, you don't want to disappoint them. That's your reputation. You're going to look like an idiot if you don't make this movie. You got to do that first. And then, find out how you're going to do it. It doesn't matter. Just find out how. That was the first step. And we made this movie on a very, very, very meager budget. I know that micro-budget cinema is a thing. It's pretty common. But I don't think it's common in the way that we made Ham On Rye, which is looking to cinematic formalism and aesthetic meticulous detail. These are not hallmarks of micro budget cinema. So this was our challenge essentially. But the beauty of the project is that we found ourselves in a time post college so someone said to me one time, they said, okay, you're going to want to make the films with your friends from college in the first 2 years after you graduate, because after that, no one's going to want to do work for no money or for no conditions anymore. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I'll rush. Okay, and I got to that point. I kind of was seeing it. People were like, no, I do this for money now. Okay. They don't tell you about the 4-year mark. They'll tell you about that mark. Because of the 4-year mark, and people say, I hate what I do for a living. I didn't think I would be doing this. Look, I'm doing these meaningless commercials, these meaningless projects all the time. What do you have going? Ham On Rye? What is that? And then you share the passion, and they go, passion. And then you get people to work with you.
And they have some experience, some real practical, real world experience.
Real experience. The people that worked on this film are very, very talented, and they are very kind to work on this film. And I'm not going to say they all experience this kind of disenchantment I'm describing. I mean, many of them are doing things that excite them. But I think that we will see people who are graduating school will see this wave of disenchantment. For sure. I mean, that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious just to hear your thoughts. I've done most of my shooting here in Los Angeles. It sounds like Ham On Rye was shot in Los Angeles too. What are some of the advantages that you see about shooting in Los Angeles versus shooting outside of Los Angeles?
Right. Well, I can only answer that from a micro budget standpoint, because once you start getting some budgets in there that might ring union bells, Los Angeles ain't the place to shoot. I mean, it is obviously for so many reasons, but they don't make it easy. There's a reason why people go everywhere else in the country to shoot films, and people have a radar of, Cincinnati's good right now, Atlanta's good right now. No one's saying Los Angeles is good right now, but for making films on a dime, it's the best. It's probably the best, because you have a vast well of resources, including actors who will work for, no one made any money on this one. This was a moneyless thing. I don't think anyone will. And so you have people coming in to work just because they want to see the project born, who are also incredibly talented in terms of acting, in terms of crew, and then you have resources like camera equipment, lights, things like this. Sound. Dude, I had an experience where before our most expensive day shooting, on the drive there, my sound guy gets into a motorcycle accident. He's fine. Getting that call was very scary, but I learned pretty quickly that he was fine. So, okay, now we got to get a sound guy. We got one on the way. So that's how do you do that in Boise, Idaho? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could, but are they going to be like perfect sound? We ADR'd one word in the whole movie. That's important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those are points well taken. What's next for you? What are you working on now, and what do you see in the near future?
Yeah, so I mentioned this Christmas film I'm making. We are currently in a sort of pre-production development packaging phase for that. And then I have another film I'm working on the screenplay, which I won't be directing, but I'm very, very excited to be a part of, which is it does not have a name at this point. And that's pretty much. Oh, and I'm actually shooting a movie right now tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
It's a COVID project, so it's me and a DP and whatever resources. Like it's kind of cool. We're shooting every other weekend, and in between those, I'm getting the actors and whoever I can get. Whatever resources I can get in my hometown, Long Island. And it's very abstract and loose. It's just to keep the everything moving.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Perfect. How can people see Ham On Rye? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like for it?
I do. It's playing in 20 cities, 20 theaters, something like that right now, and we're expecting to get at least 10 more. Obviously, due to COVID, playing in a theater only in one instance in New Orleans doesn't mean physical anymore. Well, not anymore, hopefully, but for right now, all these theaters that are beloved by the community have taken to virtual platforms. So it will be available on some legendary, amazing theaters in their virtual space, such as Anthology, Lemley, and so forth. Nice. So you can find it there.
And then at some point, will you do the video on demand?
Yes, we don't know when, because that's dependent on the theatrical. On the theatrical run, and I don't know if I'm able to say where it's going to be playing yet.
Sure,
but it's coming.
Perfect. What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing or contact you? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing. I'll round up for the show notes.
Yeah, I would say follow Ham On Rye Film. That's the best way to find out about the film's journey. I don't really have a social media presence myself.
Okay,
but maybe that'll be a good place to go. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll put that in the show notes. Tyler, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with this film, and good luck with all your future films as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, be well. Nice talking to you, Ashley.
Nice talking to you too. We'll talk to you later. I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. There have been a number of success stories come out of the service. You can find out about all the SYS Select successes by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. Also on SYS podcast episode 222, I talked with Steve Deering, who was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. These services include the newsletter. This monthly newsletter goes out to a list of over 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also provide screenwriting leads. We have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, all types of projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. We also have a number of screenwriting classes that are recorded and available in the SYS Select forum. These are all the classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to those whenever you want once you join. The classes cover every part of writing your screenplay, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that is sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Irish writer-director David Freeney, who just did a film called Dating Amber, which is a queer coming-of-age comedy. He talks through his journey as a filmmaker, which started with doing some super low-budget short films, and eventually he was able to get some grant money to shoot some bigger and bigger short films, and now he has 2 feature films under his belt. We talk about his new film, but I also was curious to hear what he had to say about getting the grant money from the Irish government. That's not something we have here in the U.S., so I don't know a lot about it, but it was something I did ask him about. And I know a lot of countries have these sorts of programs and grants for the arts. Generally, as I said, speaking, they're tied to whatever your local government is. So outside of the U.S., again, this isn't something we have. But if you're living outside of the U.S., this is something you should definitely know about and keep an eye on. There are these sorts of grants and that are out there, potentially get money to do a short film. And again, David is going to talk us through some of that next week. So keep an eye out for that episode. That's the show. Thank you for listening.